Coffee Time with Peter Gomez. We're live on 92.1 on FM and www.wcr.gm for listeners tuning in from around the world. And now you can also watch the program on YouTube a few hours after the live version. Well, we encourage you to send in your contributions for the Honorable Minister of Justice, who is also the Attorney General. The first one I'm opening this morning says, what is government doing about stateless children? Interesting question. Many children are born here. They have 18 years. They have completed school, but they find themselves without correct papers because both their parents were foreigners. Another one says, why is the Minister of Justice taking ages to approve citizenship to honest non-Gambians contributing to the economy and staying here for more than 2 decades? All right. Following the electoral defeat and exile of former dictator Yahya Jammeh in 2017, the Gambia embarked on a transitional justice process to rebuild a democratic state where human rights, individual freedoms, and rule of law prevail. But 7 years on and counting, the full benefits of the process have yet to be felt. Some even claim that the whole exercise has been a waste of time and resources the country cannot afford. Well, this morning we have an opportunity to hear the most authoritative update on the transitional justice process, because it's the Attorney General and Minister of Justice himself, Alhaji Dawda Jallow, who is in our midst, and he is accompanied by Madam Ida Pearson. Before we get into the questioning bit, Alhaji Barrow, upon hearing that the Minister of Justice was coming to the program, prepared this commentary for this week.
I came across a headline where Adama Barrow's Justice Minister claims they need almost $4.5 billion or $60 million over 5 years to set up a special tribunal and strengthen victims' reparations programs, poor victims. But I hope the people we beg from know that, just like the people of Sierra Leone, our begging will not be limited to the $4.5 billion. We will come for more. Sierra Leone asked for $75 million and spent $300 million in 3 years. The Barrow government will come begging for more than the $60 million. The other statement that caught my attention in the article was the Justice Minister's statement that the Barrow draft constitution reflects input from an extensive public consultation process, including civil society, youths, and women's organizations. Perhaps no one told the Justice Minister that his claims about extensive public consultation have been debunked by political parties, civil society, and even the very Bar Association he is a member of. Fact Check Gambia called his statement misleading, and I agree. I hope the minister stops spreading this misleading information because, frankly, it is embarrassing. Anyway, let's move away from these headlines. Oftentimes, I do not listen to the ramblings of Yahya Jammeh or his abandoned stepchildren stuck in the Gambia. But when Mahdi Jobate addresses an audio, I take time to go and listen. So I had to go and listen to the latest release from our grand comedian, the rapist, thief, and murderer, Yahya Jammeh. If indeed that audio was Yahya Jammeh's, unlike many, I do not blame Yahya for his false bravado. Seeing what is happening in the Gambia today and how Adama Barrow is so desperate to befriend Yahya Jammeh, can you blame Yahya for thinking he is still in charge of anything? So much for the so-called transitional justice we lay claim to. Here is the sad part. The failure of all transitional justice processes begins with a lack of political will. Can those claiming to be engaged in transitional justice in the Gambia swear that Adama Barrow is serious about transitional justice when he is in coalition with the very people who necessitated the need for justice? You do not need much evidence of the unseriousness of the Barrow government concerning transitional justice than the fact that they still cannot completely trust their own security forces and continue to rely on outsiders, not only for the president's security, but to keep enemies at bay. You don't need more evidence than the fact that Yahya Jammeh has the guts to threaten Adama Barrow and his government. Or that the Barrow government has only implemented 16% of the TRRC recommendations. Or that the victims continue to suffer while the Barrow government give themselves money for treatment overseas and purchase expensive SUVs for themselves. Those are their priorities, and that is where they spend their money on, not the victims. Barrow and his government cannot be serious about transitional justice when the Barrow government is in coalition with the same APRC people who remain loyal to the rapist, thief, and murderer in Yahya Jammeh. The Barrow government cannot be serious about transitional justice when Adama Barrow's chosen men who remain unrepentant about the rape and murder of Gambians, are the ones leading our National Assembly at the behest of Adama Barrow. The Barrow government cannot be serious about transitional justice when they are the very ones who sabotaged and ambushed the very constitution they commissioned, simply because it doesn't allow one man to self-perpetuate. If you remember, the very first complaint that the Barrow cabinet, including the Justice Minister, expressed was that the 2020 draft constitution discriminates against Barrow. They were more concerned about the discrimination against one individual than the discrimination against thousands of Gambians in the diaspora who are not allowed to vote. But Barrow's Justice Minister claims they believe in participatory governance. Here is the reality. No transitional justice process can ever succeed when those who support the human rights violators remain the political decision makers. Look in your parliament or go take a look at those surrounding Adama Barrow today. And Ndaysan, don't you find it ironic that Jammeh's ambassador and foreign minister, Mamadou Tangara, was the one leading the efforts to convince ECOWAS to support a court that will prosecute Jammeh? This world. No transitional justice process can ever succeed when justice crusaders are not on the same page with their political patrons. Wasn't it Adama Barrow who told us that Jammeh was free to come and live in the Gambia as a normal citizen? Isn't it the same Adama Barrow in coalition with the abusive APRC? Isn't Tombonjata going around telling his supporters that in order for Jammeh to come back home and live in the Gambia, they need to support their APRC-NPP coalition? Gambians, no transitional justice process can succeed when the focus remains fixated on prosecuting security officers while ignoring political leaders because we made them ministers and ambassadors and gave some other senior government positions. Given what obtained in this colonial space during the days of the APRC tyranny, if you think that prosecuting 70 individuals, and these are usually security officers without friends in high places, or banning few people from government work, and again, that is for those without influential friends to back them, by giving money to some victims and holding a few televised reconciliation efforts are what constitute transitional justice, I can only feel sorry for the future of our people. The donors better go and spend their money on more worthwhile efforts. This transitional justice process ain't it.
That's Alaji Barrow. And, of course, listening to him is the Honorable Minister himself. Well, not every question asked is for him to answer. He is not Tombong Jata, as Alaji refers to the Honorable Speaker. But just before we bring on the Honorable Minister, Ida, please, can you make a complete introduction of yourself?
Sure. Thank you. And good morning to everyone listening. My name is Ida Person. I'm the Special Advisor to the Honorable Minister of Justice on Transitional Justice, and I head the post-TRC unit, which is the Secretariat coordinating the implementation of the TRC recommendations. It's a pleasure.
I was so afraid of trying to, pronounce your second name, because, the way you pronounce it and the way it is spelled is usually with one S.
That's right.
And I see you spell yours with double S.
Yes.
Scared me a bit. All right. Okay. Now, welcome back. You've not been anywhere near a West Coast radio studio for God knows how long. What did I do to you?
Peter.
Anyway, welcome back.
Thank you.
Serious issues to deal with.
Thank
Transitional
you
justice.
Yes, Peter. transitional justice is misconceived to mean only the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission's work. It's far broader than that. If we run through a little bit of memory lane, we will realize that it started way after the change of government when a national conference was organized at the Kairaba Beach Hotel. This was a very wide-ranging representation from across the country. Traditional leaders, community leaders, people in authority, lawyers, Gambians from all spheres of life came in and they discussed for a couple of days as to how do we move as we move forward in this country. This was organized by the Ministry of Justice at the time, I think supported by development partners. I can't remember UNDP. I say so because I was part of that national conference, and I happened to be the rapporteur who compiled the report for that national conference. So many issues where at that time we were, thinking of what do we do with the Constitution, what do we do with the misappropriation of funds that happened during the 22 years of Jammeh, what do we do, how do we try to rebuild the institutions that we believe suffered a lot during his time, and so on and so forth. So ideas were put together. Of course, some experts were brought in from different countries and areas to come and guide the national discourse. So a report emanated, and some recommendations were made as to constitutional building process, security reform issues, then the issues of trying to seek the truth, to discover exactly what happened, and that is what led to the TRRC. The issues of investigating financial dealings of the former president led to the establishment of the Janneh Commission. So on and so forth. The issues of making sure that human rights, are respected and we don't go back to the days of violating human rights, so we need to institutionalize it. This led to the establishment of the National Human Rights Commission. So all of these things are dividends of the TJ process. Sure. So what the 16% implementation that we just hear we're talking about is with respect to the 265 recommendations that were made to government, out of which 263 were accepted. We will get into the details of those ones. Probably maybe I would give room for the expert to dwell more in details into those ones. But what has been done and achieved so far in the TJ process is way more than that 16%. That 16% need to be placed in this proper perspective. And that is with respect to only the recommendations made by the TRRC. But so many things have been done in the area of TJ, broadly, that are not linked to the TRRC. But when you look at all of that, when it comes to the TRRC itself and its 263 odd recommendations, you realize that, Peter, these recommendations are broad, and we categorize them into four main areas. There's a good set of recommendations that only recommended for reform. And when we talk about reform, we also break that down into two: institutional and legislative reform. Okay. Some of these things are not quantitative, they are qualitative. It will going to be very difficult for you to even try to measure them as we measure those that are numeric in nature. So there is a broad set of recommendations that says reforms. Institutions like the civil service have to reform. Judiciary suffered a lot under Jammeh, it has to reform. The prisons need to reform. I can go on and so on, security sector, which you mentioned. Now, there is a whole set of recommendations that only recommended reform. And reforms, either the institutions or legislation, and in some cases both, because for certain institutions to reform, their mandate is embedded in the legislation. So the legislation have to reform in order for the institutional culture itself also to change, which we have embarked on, and everybody that is following our work, you will see the ambitious legislative reform that is going on in this country. Now, there's a set of recommendations that also deals with only victim issues. And that is about reparation, about making sure that all the aspects, all the needs of victims are taken care of. And that's what led us to passing the reparations bill, albeit lately, but we did so. And then we are now setting up the Victims Commission. Ida will give the details later. And then that Victims Commission, the legislation established a Victims Fund And very soon, this agency will be up and running, and then will be a one-stop shop for all the affairs of victims. Now, there is a set of recommendations, which actually is the eye-catching one. Many people, this is the one that they see most of the time in the headlines. That is justice and accountability. There's a whole set of recommendations that only recommends that certain people need to be prosecuted for being involved in gross human rights violations. Now, that justice and accountability component, that is the one that is always in the headline, because that is what talking about prosecution.
Yes.
And prosecution is the one that many people are talking about.
Yeah.
So this is where we now have to look for a partner to establish a court that will also have to have an international jurisdiction, and that is why we have been pursuing ECOWAS for 2 years, and eventually we are happy that last December we were able to get the ECOWAS Authority of Heads of State to approve our partnership with ECOWAS to set up that kind of a court. Because the reason for that, we have said that many times on air, that some of the offenses, simply like torture, were not criminalized in the Gambia until when Jammeh left. Until recently when we passed the Torture Act, which is part of the legislative reform that we have been embarking on. Now, for you to prosecute a simple offense of a torture, you cannot do it in the Gambian courts, because they were not known to our penal code as at the time they were committed. So in order for you to set up an arrangement to have a tribunal that will assume jurisdiction to prosecute torture, you need to have an internationalized kind of a court that will be able to invoke customary international law. Because under customary international law, you don't even have to be a party to the Convention Against Torture for you, for your country or your nationals to be held responsible for the offense of torture. So that was, we embarked on that. It took us about 2 years. Finally, we were able to get that partnership, and we are going to set up that court. We're working on that. So that's justice and accountability. Of course, the special division of the High Court has already been gazetted. It has been created. And then we are now trying to recruit a special prosecutor. Once we get a special prosecutor in office, then the special prosecutor will deal with justice and accountability bit of the recommendations. He will look at all the evidential materials we have received from the Truth Commission and decide on who to prosecute, who not to prosecute, and where. He will choose the forum. There are certain offenses, like I said, they can only be prosecuted on the hybrid arrangement, but there are some that can be prosecuted on the domestic courts, and that is why the judiciary, under the leadership of the Chief Justice, have created a special division of the Gambian High Court, so he can file charges in the special division. The fourth component, Peter, and still the TRRC recommendation, the fourth component is peace building and reconciliation. Because we all know, yes, we are a peaceful country, but we know peace is not only the absence of violence. We are under a situation where we don't take our peace for granted. So therefore, there is a whole set of recommendations that requires this country to proactively promote peace, build peace, but also help people to reconcile as a country. Because we cannot also continue to live in the past. At some point, we need to reconcile and move on. So there is a whole set of recommendations dealing with that. And as a result, a bill has already been drafted to set up what we call the Peace Commission. That will be their day-to-day job, to make sure that our fragile peace is promoted, is built upon, and people are also made to reconcile. So broadly, these are the areas that the Transitional Justice, TRRC recommendations are categorized in. A lot of work is being done in these different areas, but the one that is much talked about, like I said, is justice and accountability, because that's the one that talks about prosecution.
And all that is hinged on the TRRC and its recommendations.
And the TRRC, and then there are other aspects of the TJ that are not necessarily TRRC recommendation related, and some work has been accomplished in those areas, and we continue to work in those areas. So just to put things in the proper perspective, I think that will be good enough. Ida, on my right here, has a lot more information, and I don't want to do her job for her. So she will be able to do some clarifications, and I can comment. But the two questions that the first text two messages that you read.
Yes.
These are, I want to assure the texters, I don't know whether it's the same person or two different persons.
It's the same person.
Okay, because they all bordered around the issue of citizenship.
Yeah, and yeah.
This is really a very big concern for us. That is the issue of children that were born in the Gambia have now become 18, and for some reason none of their parents are Gambians as at the time they were born, and they are not able to get Gambian citizenship. we are working hard to find a pathway for them. We've made provisions for it in the draft constitution. If that passes, that will be excellent. If whatever happens,
why say if rather than when? Why do you have doubts that it might not pass?
Well, Peter, you have to be a realistic in this situation. We are following the debates. I could change that to when it passes, but in any event, it's a process that is subject to parliamentary decision, which is not entirely in my hands.
True, absolutely.
We are following. But when that passes, and thank you for that, that would be good solution for this category of young people who have attained 17 years. Remember, this affects people who were born under the 1997 Constitution, because the 1997 Constitution that makes it mandatory that at the time of your birth, at least one of your parents must be a Gambian in order for you to be a Gambian by birth. But there are other ways of becoming a Gambian. You can naturalize, or if you happen to marry a Gambian, you can register to become a Gambian.
Which goes to, some extent to answer the second part of the question. Why is the Ministry of Justice taking ages to approve citizenship for honest non-Gambians contributing to the economy and staying here for more than 2 decades?
Yeah, but it's not every honest non-Gambian that can become a Gambian. There are other requirements. So we take application for citizenship very seriously, like any other country. That's the last thing we have as a country. So we scrutinize the applications very well, and we make sure that we treat them diligently. That much I can say. So they go through a rigorous process.
What do you look for when you evaluate their applications? First, they have to apply to become citizens of the Gambia.
Yes, they have to apply. They have to meet at least the constitutional requirement, which is if you are going through naturalization, you have to be resident for at least 15 years.
Okay.
But you must also be prepared to see Gambia as your home. That is to say, we must receive evidence that after you have acquired Gambian citizenship, you are going to continue to consider Gambia as your home. But you should also be prepared to renounce your previous nationality.
Okay.
All right? And above that, you should be able to show means that you can support yourself, and if you have family, you have the means to support your family. And there are small 1 or 2 other issues that we look at, whether you've been law-abiding during this period that you claim to have been here. And we have a way of checking those issues and verifying. And so, really...
What about being able to sing or recite the national anthem?
That's not a specific requirement, but thank you. I think we will need to look into those things.
We need to.
Yes. So, Peter, I can assure him, we take applications very seriously, but it's not only when you are honest and you have stayed here for 2 decades that you are entitled to Gambian citizenship automatically like that. Right. As a country, we look at so many other issues.
Transitional justice is the subject of discussion this morning, but of course, once you open up, the conversation to people all over the world, any question, as long as it's relative to the ministry, we will put it to the minister. Ida, you're the expert on TR. Well, it's your boss that classes you thus. The 16% plus any other gaps in his presentation before we now start taking questions for you.
Well, actually, it's 16 recommendations out of 263. The mandate to monitor...
Which would be less than 16%. That would be 8% or
approximately
something.
10%, yes. The mandate to monitor the implementation of the TRC's recommendations alone. And as the Honourable Minister said, the TRC process, the truth-seeking process into the violation of civil and political rights is just one component of a very broad transitional justice program that the Gambia is seeking to implement. Probably the most holistic that we've ever seen anywhere in the world. This is very ambitious. To at the same time having embarked on a...
Is that why it's taking so long for some of the fruits to be seen?
It depends who says that. When victims say it takes too long, we agree.
Okay.
Absolutely. However, when academics say it takes too long, and they barely ever do, then we get into debate. what is long, really, in terms of implementing some really long-term institutional reforms.
Especially damage that took one to,
Absolutely.
exact over 22 years.
Absolutely. And many of the recommendations require, a change in mindset. And we know civil society has been working on, for example, harmful traditional practices for how long in this country? 30,
40 plus years.
40 plus
yeah,
years.
Gamco Trap is over 40 now.
Absolutely. Yet we still saw that a wide number of Gambians, for example, to still practice certain practices. So, like I said, it depends who says it's long and what is long, and then we can go into debate. We can also compare the processes of other countries as well. But certainly when it comes to victims and their welfare, the issue of reparations, we agree. For every day that passes, it is truly too long. And so when I think about the recommendations, besides categorizing them in this manner, reparations, justice and accountability, reconciliation, reforms, guarantees of non-recurrence, I also like to categorize them in another way, which is to say, what must we see in our lifetime and what must continue beyond our lifetime? And what we must see in our lifetime is victims receiving reparations. And also justice, because those has to do with other people, has to do with perpetrators. So those recommendations that have to do with the lifespan of an individual must be prioritized. And those that really go to nation building, well, those should continue for as long as it takes.
The Reparations Commission, what is going to be its mandate, and how should that mandate, be carried out?
The Reparations Commission has a 5-year mandate to administer reparations, and reparations is defined very broadly. It includes compensation, it includes restitution, it includes satisfaction, rehabilitation. It's really the broadest definition one can have for reparations. Memorialization as well, and that to be done in together, not just with the commission, because this is an ad hoc commission. Memorialization continues forever, so the National Center for Arts and Culture, being a permanent institution for the government, also has that mandate to continue on memorialization efforts, so that we can really be reminded of never again. So the Reparations Commission, 5 years, 7 commissioners. As the Honorable Minister said, National Assembly has scrutinized those names. It's now before us, soon to submit to the Office of President to swear in. They must administer a fund. And prior to administering a fund, the Act specifies that they must also develop their database. Now, civil society, the victim-led organizations have been incredible in putting together, one of the most comprehensive victim databases we have. It's housed at the Victim Center, and the TRC itself tapped into that database. But we do know that even in combining the Victim Center and the TRC's databases, there probably are many other victims out there who never registered with either the Victim Center or the TRC for one reason or another. As the Honorable Minister likes saying, you're not a victim because you appeared before the TRC, you're a victim by virtue of what happened to you. So it's extremely essential that the Reparations Commission affords another opportunity for victims to engage with them, to be part of this database, because based on who is seen as a victim or identified as such, only then would they be eligible for reparations. Now, of course, they have to put in place a policy. How much or what type of program is going to be implemented. It is not an easy job at all. But really trying our best to ensure that we gather the world's best experiences in the administration of reparations and to bring it here in the Gambia.
And this policy you reference, is it going to be the mandate of the Commission to, develop that policy, or the ministry will the ministry develop it for them?
The guidelines are in their legislation already, so the policy could be internal policies. For example, they need to set rates of compensation. They have to develop documents to guide that, and so on and so forth. So those are the tools that he's referring to that they need to develop, and we will facilitate and support them to get, like he said, all the kind of experiences and resources that they need to make sure that they discharge that function.
It's Coffee Time with Peter Gomez, live on West Coast Radio on Tuesday, the 28th of January 2025.